These are players that we've looked at in their playoff schedules a little bit harder than some of the other ones, so we're going to recommend them as maybe pivots at the end of this season. For one reason or another, it could be playoff schedule, it could be situation, things like that. So we'll get into this with James Cook, obviously the biggest name on this list, in my opinion. And the reason Cook, who's the running back 6 so far on the year with his bye week, he had 20 points against Tampa Bay. He played fine. He averaged 3 yards per carry in this game. You've seen a little bit more modest showing from James Cook in the last 5 weeks he's played. But it doesn't matter because he still has that 33 and 20-point game in there, kind of propping up his performances. Yesterday was kind of saved by his receiving upside. He had like legitimately 15 points in the receiving game. He only had 5 points on the ground. And that's the beauty of owning James Cook. Now, the problem with James Cook is not really even a problem. It's just the fact that when you're looking at his playoff schedule, most of you have the playoffs in week 15. Obviously, Cincinnati's a great matchup in week 14. Pittsburgh and Houston in weeks 12 and 13 are tough. But then you get to week 15. New England is a tough defense for fantasy running backs. And so that's going to be tough. Cleveland is a tough defense for fantasy running backs still. Even though Derrick Henry did well against them this week, there's still a season-long trend of Cleveland being pretty tough. So you have 2 tough matchups in the weeks where you really need James Cook. And then Philly in week 17, also a tough matchup for James Cook. A little bit of a better matchup than the first 2, but still, with James Cook, this isn't really anything about his production. He is going to be a little bit more boom bust than I think a lot of people would like to admit. Again, you've seen this showcase over the last 6 weeks of performances. 4 and 8 points, the bye week, 33 points, and then Kansas City 13, Miami 10, and then Tampa Bay 20. And so, again, yesterday was a little bit of a weird game for James Cook because outside of yesterday, all of his performances had come against bad defenses so far. 33 points against Carolina, 20 points against New Orleans, 20 points against Miami, 26 points against the Jets, and 21 points against Baltimore. And when he's played tougher defense is what you've seen. New England, the first time he played New England, he had 4.9 points in that game. Against Atlanta, 8.7 points. You saw him against even Miami the second time he didn't do well. But the point is, against tougher defenses, this Buffalo Bills offense is going to air it out a little bit more and also get these backs, a little bit more involved in the receiving game. Now, they do that with James Cook, and you saw that again showcase in yesterday's game where he actually had 15 points through the air. It's also going to happen to guys like Ty Johnson in that offense, who also had 15 points, most of that coming in the receiving game, pretty much had an identical stat line in the receiving game to James Cook. So that is going to happen. It's just a matter of, does he get that big play, in the receiving game? Does he get that touchdown in the receiving game? And occasionally he is going to score touchdowns in these tough matchups. He's not an obvious sell because, of how he's playing or the skill set or anything like that. And it's certainly not because of his price. I mean, his price is fine. You wouldn't be selling low on James Cook if you did. But when I'm looking at where he's ranked back-to-back with Devon Achane. Achane had 10 points coming into the fourth quarter yesterday and still finished with 21 points. His playoff schedule is Pittsburgh, which is tough, Cincinnati in week 16, and then Tampa Bay in week 17. Those last 2 weeks for Achane are really good. I would rather have Achane at this point in the season. They're ranked back-to-back on the Flock site. He's right behind, 2 spots behind Jahmyr Gibbs. That's an obvious one to me. Javonte Williams, a little bit more of a, I don't know. We're recording this before the Monday night game, and so Javonte, who knows what he's going to do tonight against Las Vegas, but his, playoff schedule, Minnesota, Los Angeles, and Washington, especially Los Angeles and Washington, he will eat those defenses alive, and so I could see making a pivot to Javonte Williams late in the season as well. Saquon Barkley and Kyron Williams, kind of the same thing. Josh Jacobs is down there, and he's obviously hurt, so you have to talk about that. Once you get past those guys, I'm not even considering it, but what I'm saying is if you can pivot or use James Cook plus a little bit of a piece to get to like a Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, CMC, JT, then I would definitely do that. Point being, his playoff schedule is a little bit tougher than the guys around him. He has one of the tougher playoff schedules for running backs in the league. If you consider that something that scares you a little bit, which for me it does because he's just performed worse against tougher opponents this year, I think he could be a pivot candidate. If not, you just hold him, ride him out in the playoffs, and see if he gets you a bunch of touchdowns. He very well could because he's on the offense to do it, and he's shown in the past that he has incredible upside on a week-to-week basis when he's scoring a lot of touchdowns.
Next guy we're going to have is another big-name wide receiver, and that is going to be Ladd McConkey. Look, it's nothing against Ladd. We're not freaking again because he's had a little bit of a slow stretch. 9 points in week 9 against Tennessee, 4 points in week 11 against Jacksonville. His target volume has gone down, which is notable, and we have mentioned that in the past videos. Outside of that 9, 15, and 10 target run against Miami, Indy, and Minnesota, after this bye week, they've got Vegas, Philly, Kansas City, Dallas, and Houston. Dallas in that second round matchup in the playoffs, it's a great matchup, right? But beyond that, in the first round, you have to get through the Kansas City matchup, which is going to be tough. And then if you get through that and then you get to Dallas, which is great, then you get to the championship. I mean, you're looking at a potential really, really dud game from Ladd up against Houston, which is one of the tougher passing defenses in the NFL. Aside from that, like even aside from the playoff schedule, because again, good players, like the best players in fantasy football, are going to transcend tough matchups. Ladd McConkey is kind of on the fringe of like, high end versus just kind of middling in terms of fantasy production as a wide receiver. As a talent, though, he's talented enough to any given week transcend a bad matchup. What I care about more here is the fact that Omarion Hampton is coming back for this final end of season stretch for the Chargers. And that does kind of change the outlook of the offense as a whole. While Vidal was like a capable fill-in at running back as a top option there, he's now banged up. They definitely need Hampton back after the bye, hopefully against Vegas, if not against Philly in week 14. They might try to establish the run a little bit more than they've been able to with lackluster running back play, honestly. And hopefully that does help take the pressure off of Herbert as a passer. You might see the Chargers offense kind of get back to what we've seen in Greg Roman offenses in the past, where, again, Hampton was really coming on and they were really making him the feature back there. I think that's very, very possible with a good number of these matchups at the tail end of the season. And with Ladd, again, that target volume has been inconsistent enough this season that I don't trust it on this final run heading into the playoffs. And I would just rather pivot to guys that are ranked in the same tier according to expert average. Actually, fun fact, Nico Collins is ranked in the same tier as Ladd McConkey. I don't know if you could pull that off still with the tear that Nico has been on, but if you can, I would definitely do that. Devontae Adams, I would still take Devontae Adams over Ladd McConkey, honestly. I know Devontae Adams coming off of a one-catch game against Seattle. He had 8 targets. That target volume is phenomenal. He's getting end zone target after end zone target after end zone target at the expense of Puka Nacua, at the expense of Kyron Williams getting red zone carries. Like, they want to get the ball to Devontae Adams in the red zone constantly, essentially 100% of the time. So, like, that touchdown upside alone is much, much more than you could even dream of Ladd McConkey getting. There are a couple of guys in the tier below Ladd McConkey right now that I think are just, I think they have just as positive outlooks as he does, if not better. Like, Jalen Waddle, we had listed as a buy in the last video, in the buys video this week. I think that if you want to pivot from Ladd to Jalen Waddle, like, I have no issue with you doing that whatsoever. His playoff schedule, his end of season schedule is a lot more positive. Chris Olave as well for New Orleans. These are two teams that are going to be down most games because they don't have good enough defenses. They're kind of bottom of the league, which, what does that mean? They're going to be passing the ball a ton, and that just merits consistent high-end volume for both of these guys. And I don't think it's going to be looking much different for Ladd McConkey, and he's not producing nearly as much as they are.
I'm going to go for Tyrone Tracy as a sell. He had a great day yesterday against the Green Bay Packers defense, which is, looked like one of the better defenses to start the year, and since then they've just really haven't been that good, to be honest with you. Yeah. Green Bay as a whole has kind of just been meh. But yeah, 18 points, his first game over 15 points this year. 19 attempts for 88 yards, average 4.6 yards per carry, and had 4 receptions for 51 yards. So you add 9 points in the receiving game as well. My problem with Tyrone Tracy is this. He is not getting literally any of the short yardage or goal line carries. Like, none of them. They literally, every time, like, you can set your clock to it. Over the last 2 weeks, he hasn't gotten a single short yardage or goal line carry. It's literally all Devin Singletary. And Devin Singletary, I'm pretty sure, had 2 touchdowns in this game as well.
They gave him, I was watching that game, and every time they got like inside the 10, they were giving Singletary the ball.
So, you're looking at the snap share for this particular backfield. And in this game against the Green Bay Packers, for example, it was 37-35. Both of these guys had 17 and 17 fantasy points. Most of the time, that's going to be like 8 and 8 fantasy points, especially when Jackson Dart comes back. Jackson Dart is a weapon with his legs, and he is going to take away from these running backs. But also, these running backs are just not on a good enough offense with a good enough offensive line to be week to week productive. This was the exception, not the rule. And so because of that, Tracy tends to hold more value than Singletary. Otherwise, I would tell you to sell Singletary. But I don't really want a running back in this offense going into the fantasy playoffs. And in fact, this is kind of testing our theory here because, his playoff schedule is actually pretty good. He's got Washington, Minnesota. Minnesota's tough. And then Vegas. Vegas actually has been decent against running backs this year. But Washington, that matchup in week 15 is a great one coming off of a bye week. But it doesn't really matter to us. With Tracy, it's less about the schedule because schedule be darned. I mean, he's had games, easy games in the last, since Scatterby has gone out where he hasn't really produced. And so I'm not super interested in having him. You don't feel comfortable flexing Tyrone Tracy, to be honest with you. And I think you can probably get some other guys there, particularly in the wide receiver category, that you'd feel a little bit better about flexing than Tyrone Tracy, who, again, I think is just going to be hit or miss on a weekly basis to the point where you don't feel comfortable starting him enough. Like Troy Franklin, I'd be willing to take a shot on over Tyrone Tracy, to be honest with you. Juwan Jennings, I would be willing to take a shot on over Tyrone Tracy. Josh Downs, I would be willing to take a shot on. Even Rashid Shaheed, I actually don't know what he did in his second game. But either way, Tracy is splitting a bad backfield. I do not want any part of that personally. Rashid Shaheed had a 54% snap, so 20% higher than the week before, had 5 targets, had 5 points. But you don't know how much he's going to get involved in that offense. And so, so maybe not Shaheed, honestly. But all the other guys I still would. I don't love Tyrone Tracy, and I do think he has, some, especially to a running back needy team, he has some value. I think you could trade him for a decent haul right now.
We usually see this every year. There's about a 6-week stretch where DeAndre Swift just pops off. And he looks incredible. He looks unstoppable. He's hyper efficient on the ground. He's hyper efficient in the air if and when he gets receiving work. And then you see him come back down to earth. And I think this is going to be about the time. We're approaching that time at least. The next couple of weeks, he has Pittsburgh and Philly. And then weeks 14 through 17, that's the week before the playoffs, and then his playoff run. Green Bay, Cleveland, Green Bay, and San Fran. We just talked about Green Bay, saying that Green Bay's defense is a little bit more middling than we would have expected to end the season, but it still is average to above average. And with a guy like DeAndre Swift, like that is going to impact what his production outlook is, not to mention a little bit of a concerning sign this week. When we thought that Swift had kind of established himself as the number one back there, in Chicago's backfield after coming back from that injury against Cincy. When they played the Giants, he had like 14 points, almost 15 points, 13 carries, and Monangai had not as much volume, not nearly as much volume, and they loved giving Swift the ball. What I saw this week against Minnesota is they got into the red zone and they gave Monangai most of the red zone carries. And that is a bit of a worry, actually, to a point where Monangai actually ended up getting, he had a touchdown in this game. He had 10 points to Swift's 9. Now, Swift still had 21 carries, and Monangai only had 12. But again, that's enough volume for Monangai, especially when you're talking about a lot of those carries coming not between the 20s, but inside the 20, where that does heavily impact what DeAndre Swift's production upside could be any given week. And again, you stack that onto really, really tough playoff opponents when you're talking about the run defenses that he's going against. I think this is a recipe for potential disaster for DeAndre Swift owners if you don't move off of him right now. And I understand that might be a little bit tough at the moment because he's had 15 and 9 points the last couple of weeks, nothing crazy, but there's going to be enough interest there where he's being ranked in the same range as Chase Brown and Omarion Hampton. Omarion Hampton at this point is close enough to a return that I would just take the more talented running back that I know is going to get all the carries in that offense when he's back healthy. I would move Swift at this point in time for Omarion Hampton, whereas that was not the case 4 weeks ago. It's changed now because we're closer to a Hampton return. Quinshon Judkins is a guy that we have listed as a buy. Judkins is another guy that, again, I said in the buys video, he's probably the most achievable bell cow running back that you can go acquire right now in your fantasy football leagues because he has not been producing at a solid level and he's got a real nice playoff outlook, a real nice rest of season outlook given his matchups that I do prefer over DeAndre Swift. And again, he's no one sniffing 10 to 12 carries like Monangai is in Cleveland's offense. It's Judkins and that's it. There are a couple other guys here. Chase Brown with Burrow coming back. I would give the nod to Chase Brown with Burrow coming back. Henderson is getting pretty close for me, honestly. I think the risk that you have in taking on Henderson is just as much as if you're going to ride out the season with DeAndre Swift with that playoff matchup and with Monangai getting the red zone work. So shop Swift around, see what you can get. If you can get any of those running backs that I mentioned, I think I might just pull the trigger.
This one's a little bit tougher because I actually don't think he's ranked as high as most people would suspect, but RJ Harvey is going to be a self-force because he has a brutal playoff schedule, one of the toughest in the league. Week 15 against Green Bay, week 16 against Jacksonville, and week 17 against Kansas City. It's tough, and you've seen, he just played Kansas City. They obviously have a bye week now. But in that matchup, he did have 60% of the snaps there, his highest snap share of the season by far. Had 11 carries, had 3 targets, and still only had 8 points. He was inefficient on the ground. And, with RJ Harvey, that's actually been a theme this year. When he's not breaking big runs, he's very inefficient on the ground. I'm just not sure from a talent standpoint, honestly, that RJ Harvey can be like that every down average 4+ yards per carry back in this offense this year, especially against tough matchups like he's going to have in the playoffs. So because of that, I think he's going to have a very low floor. And that's what you've seen even showcase in week 11. When you are the starter and the bell cow in an offense and you only have 8 points, that's a low floor that you really can't afford to flex in the fantasy playoffs. Now, when I'm looking at the rankings and where RJ Harvey is ranked, I mean, he's ranked in this tier with David Montgomery, Woody Marks, Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Walker, and Trey Benson, which actually is pretty disgusting. I don't love any of those guys compared to Harvey's upside, but I'm just going to go ahead and look because I can see some trades already. Somebody traded, Kamara straight up for Harvey today. I would probably take Kamara. Kamara has a very favorable end of the season schedule, and I think his floor is just as low. Why not take the guy with the better schedule? They're very comparable fantasy assets, right? I don't know how. Somebody traded RJ Harvey for Devontae Adams. Somebody traded RJ Harvey for Devontae Smith. So there are rare cases in casual leagues, in taco leagues, where you can actually trade RJ Harvey for something valuable. I don't think that that's common, but I think it is possible at this point.
So speaking of tacos, would you do you eat the taco head up or do you move your head to eat the taco sideways?
Is this a discussion?
It's a Scatterboo discussion. You haven't seen the video.
Like what kind of taco?
Like a normal taco, like
a hard shell or soft shell, or
doesn't matter.
Soft shell.
Soft shell. Yeah.
So if I have a taco,
are you dominating the taco, or are you letting the taco dominate you? Turning your head to the side.
I'm very vulnerable to tacos. I think I'm pretty sure they dominate.
100%. I'm letting the taco dominate.
Yeah, it's a taco. Yeah, I'm absolutely giving the taco full control in this situation. Yeah. So, anyways, you can use them as a throw-in. I saw somebody use RJ Harvey and Devontae Adams to get to CD Lamb. Right, I love him as an up-tier candidate here. It's just not somebody that I just feel super comfortable rostering or starting in my flex spot during the playoffs. While he has some hype around being the starting running back, with J.K. Dobbins obviously being somebody who's not going to play the next couple of weeks, I would definitely try to move off of him. And again, I think he's still priced a little bit low, but see what you can do, especially as like a 2-for-1 where you throw him in another piece and try to upgrade either a running back or wide receiver position, especially in like start 7 leagues. Like you should have already done that, but start 8 leagues even, like I think there's a very good possibility that you can use RJ Harvey as a very valuable throw-in to increase your flex spot or increase one of your wide receiver or running back spots. And so with Harvey, again, it's the playoff schedule. It's the fact that, he's been super hit or miss this year. I just don't feel super comfortable with him in the playoffs.
Okay, so I want to take a little bit of a step back from the playoff schedule outlooks for these guys, and I just kind of have a general sell for you when it comes to the general structure of your fantasy roster. And this plays into the greater context of the amount of injuries that we've been suffering from this season. I mean, week 11, I think in recent memory was one of the worst, most devastating weeks of injuries that I've probably ever seen this late in the season, because generally a lot of the devastating ones come like in spurts during the start of the year, and it's usually a big name here, a big name there. This week it was just like, it was absolute carnage all over the place. And what I've been seeing, and we answer a number of trade questions on the Flock site for a ton of you redrafters, and a lot of them involve a specific tight end, one of which is Tyler Warren. Generally, you're moving Tyler Warren for a perceived less productive tight end, or a guy that is going to be less consistent than Tyler Warren is going to be, but when you're looking at Tyler Warren's production upside, it is a significant step down from your top end elite guys like Bowers, McBride, and Kittle, right? You're seeing what Bowers, McBride, and Kittle are doing on a weekly basis. Their target volume is well over Tyler Warren's, or just their efficiency with that, and their touchdown usage specifically is just well above what Tyler Warren is getting right now. So for reason number one for moving Tyler Warren, reason number one, and this could be good enough reason alone, JT's on pace to score 30 touchdowns this season. When they get in the red zone, they're giving the ball to Jonathan Taylor and no one else. And, by the way, you have Michael Pittman, who's having one of the better seasons that we've ever seen from him, and he's been getting a big reason for that has been his touchdown usage as well. You have Alec Pierce, who's looking like the best version of himself. You're getting rushing touchdowns from Daniel Jones. Tyler Warren is kind of the afterthought there. I mean, Tyler Warren has just as good a chance of getting a rushing touchdown as a receiving touchdown, and both of those chances are pretty low at this point, given the number of weapons that are in that offense. This is not a Tyler Warren is not good enough to have productive games. Again, you saw that when JT had like 55 points last week. Tyler Warren still had like 18 points in PPR formats, which is great for him. I don't really care about the playoff schedule, though, at this point, even though they're playing Houston twice, even though they have Kansas City, even though they're playing Seattle, which I think is good enough reason. I think that's another great reason for you to move off of Tyler Warren. It's just with the nature of the structure of trades involving Tyler Warren, it's generally a tight end downgrade from Tyler Warren and an upgrade at a skill position at running back or wide receiver. And I think that merits, I think the upgrade that you get at running back or wide receiver raises your upside much more than downgrading from Warren to another guy, because his production level is not elite enough to get him into that same tier as McBride and Kittle, where you are actually taking a significant hit at the tight end position. For example, I mean, there are a number of tight ends that I'm looking at in the range of Warren right now. I mean, Travis Kelce really is doing the same thing that Tyler Warren is right now. The floor of Jake Ferguson, you can be concerned about that with Pickens and CeeDee Lamb back together now, but I still would probably, I still view Tyler Warren and Jake Ferguson pretty similarly. Oronde Gadsden is getting the same amount of target volume that Tyler Warren gets on a weekly basis. And again, some of these guys are not as good as Tyler Warren. And if you were to say, which one do you prefer in a vacuum? I would prefer Tyler Warren over a good number of them in a vacuum. But it's the upgrades that you can get at other positions that are going to really help you out quite a bit. And again, with the injuries, I think getting the extra help at running back and wide receiver matters more than having a step down from an elite tight end already in Warren. Again, Warren is great. It's not about him. It's about what you probably need to bolster at running back and wide receiver, given the number of injuries that I don't think anybody is exempt from at this point in time in fantasy football. Like, I think literally everyone in every single league has some sort of devastating injury. I'm convinced of it. And I know I'm exaggerating, but like, I'm pretty convinced of it. So aside from that, if you're looking at like that structure move, you could also just do a 1-for-1. Let's say you hit on Tyler Warren in the late rounds and you still have a Trey McBride. I've seen this deal plenty of times where people hold two tight ends because they took an early guy and then they took a late guy like Warren. Or let's say you have Tyler Warren and Jake Ferguson because you took two late round shots. Why don't you just move Tyler Warren for value equivalent guys according to expert consensus, like Tet McMillan, like Marvin Harrison? I would take a shot on Marvin Harrison over Tyler Warren at this point in time. Why don't you move Tyler Warren for a guy like Hampton, who's going to be back healthy in a couple of weeks? I would move Tyler Warren for Chase Brown. I move Tyler Warren for Quinshon Judkins, who's going to be a big faller right now. The production upside, opportunity, and capability of those skill position guys is greater than what you're going to get from Tyler Warren the rest of the season.
All right, last guy here. This isn't a guy that has a ton of value anyways, but just from a playoff schedule standpoint, week 15, Philly, week 16, Houston, and week 17, the New York Giants. Obviously a good week 17 matchup there, but he has Denver in week 14 as well, and that's going to be Tre Tucker. These Raiders have a tough schedule rest of the season, even going from Dallas in week 11 is a good one, but Cleveland, LAC, Denver, Philly, and Houston, that 5-week stretch is just brutal for these Raiders wide receivers. Tucker has been the guy there. He has been the guy that has been the wide receiver one, but recently that hasn't amounted to much, and that's why I don't think you're going to even get much for him. So I'm actually not even going to spend much time on this. I'm just going to say, if you can get anything, if you can pivot to another like flex level guy for Tre Tucker, like let me just check this real quick. Let me see if my theory is right. If you can pivot from Tre Tucker to Tre Tucker, you can get Josh Downs. I mean, you can get Parker Washington, like those types of guys. I would even be willing to just pivot to guys like that. Troy Franklin again, like I would be willing to pivot to him. So, he has a tough playoff schedule. I'm not sure he's worth anything, but definitely I wouldn't be comfortable starting in the playoffs this year. So, again, these are mostly situational sells, not really anything about their talent or, and some of these guys are still going to produce in the playoffs. Like a tough playoff matchup does not always mean that they're not going to produce. But in terms of, trying to be as strategic as we can, I think, playoff schedule can be overblown for really good players, but I think for players that are more flex level, I think that, and for players like James Cook who are good, but at the same time, there's more boom or bust to compared to bad teams. Like I think it actually does make a little bit of difference. So we're just trying to give every advantage that we can. We probably won't do another sales video. So drop a like, make sure you subscribe. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here soon.